6, conference with Pizarro. At the instance of the opening of the new campaign, Napoleon, who was more anxious than ever on account of the progress of affairs at Venice, having a presentiment of some secret machinations on the part of the Senate, resolved to make another effort towards a negotiation and desired to have an interview with Pizarro, the head of the Austrian party, who at that moment conducted all the affairs of the Republic. Pizarro described the critical state of the Republic, the bad disposition of the people, legitimate complaints against Brescia and Bergamo, and their partisans in the other provinces of the terra firma. He said the difficult circumstances obliged the Senate to resort to strong measures and to extraordinary armaments which ought not to give any umbrage to the French general, that the Senate was under the necessity of making arrests in Venice and the terra firma, and that it would be unjust to regard those steps as rigorous proceedings on the part of the Senate against the partisans of France, when they were, in fact, only the just punishment of turbulent citizens who wanted to overthrow the laws of their country. The French general did not dispute the critical situation of Venice, but without wasting his time in discussing the causes of those difficulties, he came fairly to the point. You wish to arrest those whom you call your enemies and whom we call our friends. You nominate to official situations persons who are notorious for their hatred of us and their connections with the Austrians. Your troops increase. They are marching, they say, against the Jacobins. What more remains for you to do to be openly at war with us? A war against France would be your total and immediate ruin. In vain would you reckon upon Prince Charles. Your calculation would be erroneous. I shall beat him and drive him out of Italy in less than 8 days. There is one way to get out of the disagreeable situation we are in. I am willing to put an end to your sufferings. I offer you the alliance of the Republic. I will secure you and all your estates in the terra firma, not accepting your authority in Brescia and Bergamo. You shall declare war against Austria and give me 10,000 men as a contingent. I think it would be right to enter the principal families of the terra firma in the Golden Book, but I do not make it a condition sine qua non. Return to Venice, get the Senate to deliberate, and come and sign a treaty which alone can save your country and secure an amicable understanding between us. Pizarro had gone to great length. He wanted to gain time. He confessed the wisdom of the plan and departed for Venice, promising to return in less than a fortnight. During this interval, many events took place. On the 13th of March, the French army passed the Piave. As soon as Pizarro was informed of this, he dispatched orders to Bergamo to arrest 14 of the principal inhabitants and bring them before the Council of 10. These inhabitants were the leaders of the patriotic party. They got intelligence of what was intended from a clerk in Venice attached to their party, intercepted by the courier who was the bearer of the order. Arrest the Proveditore himself reclaimed the liberty of Bergamo on the 14th of March. They sent deputies to the French general to inform him of these events, who did not overtake him until they arrived at the field of battle of the Tagliamento. This intelligence was extremely unwelcome to him, but there was no remedy. The people of Bergamo had already entered into confederacy with Milan, the capital of the Republic of Lombardy, and with Bologna, the capital of the Transpidane Republic. A similar revolution took place a few days after at Salo and Brescia. The 2,000 Sclavonians who were in the latter town were disarmed. The Proveditore Battaglia was respected, was sent back to Verona. Pizarro returned according to the promise. He rejoined the French general at Palmanova. Prince Charles had been defeated on the Tagliamento. Palmanova had opened its gates and the French flag waved at Tarvis beyond the Isonzo on the summit of the Noric Alps. Have I kept my word, said Napoleon? The Venetian territory is covered with my troops. The Germans are flying before me. I shall be in Germany in a few days. What does your republic desire? I have offered her the alliance of France. Does she accept it? No, said Pizarro. Venice rejoices in your triumphs. She knows well that she can only exist by means of France, but constant to her ancient wise policy, she wishes to remain neutral. Besides, what good could we do you? Under Louis the 12th, Francis I, we were of some weight in the scale of battle, but now with such immense armies, with whole populations under arms, what value can you set on our assistance? But do you still continue your armaments? "We must do so," said Pizarro. "Brescia and Bergamo have raised the standard of rebellion. Our faithful subjects are threatened at Crema, Cari, and Verona. Venice itself is disturbed." "Well," replied the French general, "are not these additional reasons for accepting the proposals I have made you? But they would put an end to all these troubles. But your fate hurries you on. Reflect, however. It is a mere decisive moment for your republic than you think. I leave a greater force in Italy than would suffice to subject you. I am quitting Italy to penetrate deep into Germany. If there should be troubles in my rear, through your fault, if my soldiers should be insulted through your exciting yours against the Jacobins, that which will have been no crime while I remain in Italy will be an unpardonable one when I am in Germany. Your republic would cease to exist. You would have pronounced its condemnation. If I have reason to complain of you, whether I am victorious or defeated, I will make peace at your expense." Pizarro, of course, made many protestations and excuses, and then took his leave. The proposals of the French general had been warmly discussed in the Senate and rejected. What would be the end of such an alliance? It had been said, "The loss of our 10,000 Sclavonians. At the first battle, on their first victory, we should no longer possess them. Napoleon would give them honors and rewards. He would infallibly draw them away by that magic which always chains the soldier to the general who leads them to victory." They decreed, accordingly, the alliance with Austria and sent instructions to their envoy at Vienna to conclude the treaty, notwithstanding the defeat of Prince Charles. Thus did this ancient republic run blindly to its ruin and become the dupe of treacherous and Machiavellian policy of Vienna. 7. Insurrection at Venice massacred the French in Verona, Loudon, commander of the Tyrolese levy, which had retreated to Innsbruck before Joubert no sooner found that the general entered into the Puthersdorf then he returned into the Tyrol to continue the organization of his insurrection and to follow the small French corps of observation, which was retiring on the débouchés of Italy to protect Verona. Loudon had a few troops. Almost all those which had been opposed to Joubert had received orders to file off as quickly as possible to join Prince Charles. His movement in the Tyrol was therefore of little importance. It had been expected by Napoleon, but he had thought it of the utmost importance to have all his troops at hand. Loudon, with the activity and address of a true partisan, inundated the country with proclamations and news. He spread reports that the armies of the Rhine and the Sambre and Meuse had been annihilated in attempting to repass the Rhine, that the Tyrol had been the tomb of the French, and that Joubert's army had perished. He exhorted the Venetians in all Italy to a general revolt and called upon them to rise en masse in the rear of the French. At the same moment, similar intelligence spread by the friends of Pizarro. They arrived from Venice, thus coming from two different sources. It is no wonder that it easily obtained belief in the Venetian states, particularly as the armies of the Rhine had actually sustained a similar check in the former year. At Brescia and Bergamo, where the partisans of liberty were the strongest, they immediately took up arms, arranged their plans with the French governors, and sent deputations to Milan, Modena, and Bologna in order to secure mutual support. But in Verona, where the party of the Senate prevailed, and which Pizarro considered as the point of appui of his party, the people, the military, and the magistrates, all rose against the French, many of whom were arrested in their houses. 400 of our sick were murdered in the hospitals. The French were compelled to shut themselves up in the external forts of Verona and in that which had been formed within the city at the entrance to the third bridge. Kilmaine, who would not suffer himself to be cut off from Victor when the latter should return from Rome, left the city with such part of his force as was not required for guarding the castles and retired to the Mincio. Thus the line of St. Marco rose triumphant and terrible, for instead of repressing this dangerous commotion, Pizarro's party entered heartily into it. Whether they really believed the account of Joubert's destruction, whether they were ignorant of Victor's corps, a reserve already near Verona was coming up with all possible expedition, or finally whether in their blind animosity they were in hopes of destroying all innovators and of having time to make a grand example of them, or whether it was merely to glut oligarchical revenge, they filled the terra firma with Sclavonian detachments and furiously pursued the patriots, ringing the tocsin and replicating the cry of death to the innovators. and their adherents. In vain did the French minister to the Senate exert himself to make it sensible of the abyss it was digging for itself. In vain he denied the ledger verses in the Tyrol and those of the armies of the Sambre and Meuse and Rhine. In vain he explained to them the plan of the campaign, shewed them that Gibert's movement was part of a fixed plan, that he was marching on Carinthia by the Puthersal, and that instead of being ruined, he had obtained his object. No credit was given to his assurances. The contrary was too eagerly wished for. Passion prevailed, and they would believe nothing unfavorable to their hopes. The court of Vienna at the same time took care to promise to sign whatever Venice should propose. It was perfectly sensible that an insurrection in the rear of the French was highly advantageous to its interest, on account of a corps of reserve left by the French general at Palmanova, of the garrison of Asopo, and of the prudence of the Proveditore Mocenigo. Fewer excesses were committed in Friuli. Perhaps the people of that country, being near the French army, were also better informed with respect to events. The Brescians and others of the terra firma, however, as well as all the Italians of the republics, evinced courage and energy against the Venetians. At the same time, marching battalions proceeded from all the depots and trains of artillery from our fortresses. Victor's division at length arrived from the expedition to Rome, although late, and Verona was soon blockaded by an army. The insurgents made a powerful resistance. They yielded only to superior forces and to reiterated attacks, and maintained themselves up to the 24th of April. The 8th, the aide-de-camp Junot, sent to the Senate of Venice as soon as the French general was informed of the disorders and murders which were committed in his rear. He sent his aide-de-camp Junot to Venice, charged with a letter for the Senate, dated from Jundenburg, the 19th of April, and couched in the following terms: throughout the terra firma, the subjects of the most serene republics are in arms. The rallying cry is "Death to the French!" The number of the soldiers of the army of Italy who have fallen victims already amounts to several hundreds. In vain you affect to disavow the tumults and mobs which you yourselves instigated. Do you imagine that I, who have succeeded in carrying our arms to the heart of Germany, shall want strength to force you to respect the first nation of the world? Do you think the legions of Italy will endure the massacres you excite? The blood of my brethren in arms shall be avenged, and there is not a single French battalion which, when charged with that generous mission, will not feel conscious of 3 times the courage and strength necessary to punish you. The Senate of Venice has returned the generosity with which we always behaved towards it, with the blackest perfidy. I now send you my proposals by one of my aides-de-camp commanding a brigade. Peace or war? You do not instantly take all necessary measures for dispersing mobs and suppressing tumults, if you do not instantly arrest and deliver into my hands the authors of the murders which are committed, war is declared. The Turk is not on your frontiers. No enemy menaces you, and yet you have, in pursuance of a premeditated design, caused priests to be arrested in order to produce a popular tumult and to turn it against the army. I give you 24 hours to suppress it. The times of Charles VIII are gone by. If, notwithstanding the indulgence which the French government has shown you, you reduce me to the necessity of making war, do not imagine that the French soldier, like the robbers whom you have armed, will ravage the fields of the innocent and unfortunate people of the terra firma. No, I will protect them, and they shall bless the very crimes that have obliged the French army to wrest them from your tyrannical sway. Bonaparte. The aide-de-camp had orders to read this letter himself to the assembled Senate and to express to them all the indignation which her conduct had excited. But terror had already seized on Venice. The illusion was dissolved. It was known that the armies of the Rhine had never stirred and had sustained no reverse. That Joubert had arrived at Villac with his whole army. That Victor, having returned from Rome, was investing Verona. That Augereau, returned from a mission to Paris, was advancing under the Guns with a division of marching battalions, and finally that Napoleon, victorious in every battle, had spread terror even into Vienna, that he had just granted a suspension of arms to his enemies, and that they had sent plenipotentiaries to him to sue for peace. The detection of the Venetians was extreme. The French minister presented Junot. The Senate received him with the greatest humility. All means were employed to soften him, but he fulfilled his mission with all the bluntness of a soldier, which greatly increased the terror of the Senate, and in the same proportion encouraged the friends of liberty and induced them to take the upper hand in the city. The Senate sent a grand deputation to the French general, offering him any reparation he could desire and promising to submit to whatever he might think fit to prescribe. Every expedient was tried. Millions were offered to all who were thought to have any influence. All was unavailing. The Senate then dispatched couriers to Paris and placed considerable sums at the disposal of its ministers in order to gain over the members of the Directory and induce them to give the French general such orders as would save Venice. All these attempts are fruitless with respect to the French general, but they succeeded at Paris. The distribution of some money and the promise of 10 millions procured the minister of Venice favorable letters and the dispatch of corresponding orders, but they were not ratified with all the forms desired. Besides, the dispatches of the ministers of the Senate were intercepted. The French general there found the clue to the whole intrigue. The amount of the sums given and of the bills of exchange, and by this discovery, all was annulled. Toward the end of April, Napoleon returned by Gratzley back Trieste and Palmanova. Thence he passed to Trevisa on the edge of the lagunas, visited the different debouches of the canals, and on the 3rd of May published an order of the day by which, granting his proceedings on the natural law of repelling force by force, he declared war against Venice. This order of the day completed the terror and confusion of that city. The arms fell from every hand. Defense was no longer even thought of. The Grand Council of the aristocracy dissolved itself and restored to the people the sovereignty of which a municipal body became the depository. Thus these oligarchs, so proud, so long consulted by the French general, whose alliance had been courted with so much good faith, fell without any means of salvation. In their last agonies, they in vain solicited the interference of the court of Vienna. In vain they requested it to include them in the suspension of arms and negotiation for peace. That court was deaf to all their entreaties. It had its views. The 9th, the French troops entered Venice. Revolution in that city. Barraquer-Dillier entered Venice with his division towards the middle of May. He took possession of the lagoons, the forts, the batteries of the town, and planted the tricolored flag in St. Mark's Place on the 16th. The Friends of Freedom immediately met in a popular assembly. The aristocracy was abolished, and Dandolo, an advocate of Venice, placed himself at the head of all affairs. The line of St. Mark and the famous horses of Corinth, which were in that city, were transported to Paris. 12 64-gun ships, as many frigates and some smaller vessels were found. They were all manned and sent to Toulon. Corfu was one of the most important points of the Venetian Republic. General Gentili, the same, who had been sent to retake Corsica, was sent there with 4 battalions and some companies of artillery. A squadron formed of Venetian ships took possession of that place, the true key of the Adriatic, as well as of the other 6 Ionian islands, Zante, Surigo, Cevallonia, etc. Pizarro and his principal friends remained overwhelmed with general odium. They were accused of having ruined the Republic by entrusting its fate to the Austrians. They fled from Venice and took refuge at Vienna. Battaglia sincerely regretted the ruin of his country, having long censured the course which was followed. He had too clearly foreseen the catastrophe and survived it but a short time. 10. Revolution throughout the terra firma. On the reception of the order of the day declaring war against Venice, the whole terra firma revolted against the capital. Every city proclaimed its independence and formed a government. Bergamo, Brescia, Padua, Vicenza, Bassano, and Udine immediately became so many separate republics. It was on the same system that the Cispidine and Transpidine republics had begun. The principles of the French Revolution were universally adopted. The convents were restricted. National domains were established. Feudal privileges were suppressed. The flower of the nobility and great proprietors united in squadrons of hussars and chasseurs under the title of Guards of Honor. The inferior classes associated in battalions of National Guards. The national colors of Italy were adopted, and confederacies were established. Notwithstanding the extreme vigilance of the French general to prevent abuses and malversations, these malpractices were more frequent at this time than at any other period of the War of Italy. The country was divided between 2 very violent factions. The passions were more ardent, and the excesses more daring. At the time of the surrender of Verona, the amount of piety in that city, which possessed 7 or 8 millions, was robbed. The commissary Bouquet and Angier, a colonel of hussars accused of this horrible spoliation were arrested. This robbery was more atrocious as it was agreed by a series of crimes committed in order to conceal it. And as the sufferers were the poor and indigent, all that could be found in the houses of the accused was restored to the proprietors, whose loss was nevertheless very considerable. Fragments on Loban. The fourth, operations of Joubert in the Tyrol. Joubert had defeated the enemy on the Avisio on the 20th of March, taking several thousand prisoners, had pursued him to Boltzen, defeated him again at Clausen, and directed his march on the right by the Puthersthal along the Draft, had marched to enter Carinthia and to take up the left of the French army. He had left a corps of observation on the Avisio to cover Verona in Italy. This corps was, in case of necessity, to fall back at Montebaldo. Bernadotte, on his side, after having organized Carniola, had rejoined the army, leaving a corps of observation under the command of General Friant to cover Laybach, as there was an appearance of menace on the side of Croatia. Austria had made a considerable levy amongst that population of a peculiar and wholly military organization. Friant had had several brilliant affairs, but not expecting to maintain Fiume, he contented himself with taking up a position proper for covering Laybach and Trieste. He had, moreover, been instructed, in case of need, to regain Palmanova, which had been well armed, and to increase the corps of observation which had been left there to cover Italy. From Klagenfurt, the French army continued to march towards the Mur. Prince Charles was in hopes of being able to maintain his ground in the passes of Neumark. It was of great importance to him to be enabled to cover his communications with Salzburg, the Inn, and the Tyrol, whence he expected very considerable reinforcements. In order to be more sure of them, he requested a suspension of arms of the French general, who, comprehending his aim, refused it. He was then attacked at Neumark and forced without striking a blow. He lost some cannon and prisoners. A division of grenadiers from the Rhine covered his retreat. He was again attacked and defeated once more at Hunsmark. In short, our headquarters reached Jundenburg, and our advanced posts were pushed as far as the Simmering. Thenceforth, all Prince Charles's calculations with respect to his reinforcements were frustrated. We now cut him off from the two roads of the Tyrol and of Salzburg. The troops which had been opposed to Joubert in the Tyrol, and which the prince had recalled to him, and those much more considerable forces which were on their march from the Rhine by Salzburg to join him, both which were now advanced in those crossroads, were obliged to retrograde, having thenceforth no prospect of rallying around Prince Charles except behind the Simmering. Disorder and terror prevailed in Vienna. Nothing could stop this terrible French army. All those positions seemed impregnable. All those passes which it had been judged impossible to force were now cleared, and the tricolored flag waved on the top of the Simmering 3 days' march from Vienna. Part of the imperial family had left that capital. Maria Louisa, who afterwards married Napoleon, then 6 years of age, was sent away with her sisters. The archives and most valuable effects were moved into Hungary. All the principal families, imitating that of the sovereign, hastily removed all that was most precious to them, and people of the best understanding considered the monarchy as being on the eve of a total overthrow. When the French general opened the campaign, the government had promised him that as soon as he should have passed the Isonzo, the armies of the Rhine and Sambre and Meuse, consisting of more than 250,000 men, should leave their winter quarters and penetrate into Germany. But the Isonzo had long since been passed, and these armies still remained in their winter quarters. The French general, taking advantage of the victory of the Tagliamento and of the wrong directions in which Prince Charles had moved his columns, had cleared all obstacles between the Alps and the Simmering without loss. And by that one victory, the 7th, Napoleon writes to Prince Charles. The day after the victory of the Tagliamento, Napoleon informed the Directory that he had closely followed Prince Charles, and that the French colors would soon wave on the heights of the Simmering, that he trusted the armies of the Rhine and Sambre and Meuse were on their march, or that at least they soon would be so. He was particularly urgent, above all things, to be informed of the precise moment of their moving. The delay of a fortnight or 3 weeks was of little importance to him, but he ought to be informed of it in order to act accordingly. He stated that he should always keep his army united and disposable, and that his dispositions would be such that he should always be master of the course of events. It would therefore be sufficiently merely to acquaint him with the precise moment of the march of these two armies. It was at Klagenfurt that he received the answer to this dispatch. It brought him the congratulations of the Directory on his new successes, but contained at the same time the extraordinary declaration that the armies of the Rhine and of the Sambre and Meuse would not pass the Rhine, and that a division by them in Germany must not be reckoned upon, because the calamities of the last campaign had deprived them of their boats and other requisite equipment. This strange dispatch could only have originated in some intrigues or political views which it was useless to attempt to penetrate into. But it was no longer feasible for the French general to accomplish what had been the object of his most ardent wishes, the planting of his colors on the ramparts of Vienna. He could no longer think of passing the simmering consistently with the rules of prudence. Accordingly, 2 hours after receiving the courier, he wrote to Prince Charles that, being empowered to negotiate, he offered him the glory of giving peace to the world and of terminating the misfortunes of his country. Mr. General-in-Chief, brave soldiers, though they make war, are desirous of peace. Has not the present contest lasted 6 years? Have we not killed men enough and sufficiently afflicted humanity? Her voice calls loudly upon us. Europe, after taking up arms against the French Republic, has laid them down. Your nation stands alone. Your blood is about to flow more profusely than ever. This 6th campaign opens under sinister omens. Whatever may be the issue, we shall kill on both sides some thousands of men more. And after all, we must necessarily come to an agreement, since all things have an end, not excepting vindictive passions. The executive directory of the French Republic had communicated to His Majesty the Emperor its desire of putting an end to the war which ravages all nations. The intervention of the court of London opposed this measure. Is there then no hope of coming to an understanding? And must we, for the sake of serving the interest and gratifying the passions of a nation, which is a stranger to the calamities of war, continue this mutual slaughter? You, Monsieur General-in-Chief, who by your birth are so near the throne, and above all those little passions which often inspire ministers and governments, are you resolved to merit the title of a benefactor of humanity at large and savior of Germany? Do not imagine, sir, that I mean to insinuate that it is impossible to save Germany by force of arms, but even supposing the chances of war should become favorable to you, that would not preserve your country from devastation. For my part, sir, should the overture I have now made prove the means of saving the life of one individual, I should be prouder of the civic crown, which I should think I had thereby merited, than of all the mournful glory which results from military successes. Bonaparte. This news allowed them to breathe again at Vienna and gave them some hopes. The Marquis de Gallo, Neapolitan ambassador, was immediately sent to the French general, but having no powers, he was obliged to return. After a conference of 2 hours, the following day, Generals Bellegarde and Meerfeld came to the French headquarters at Hindenburg, and giving their word of honor that plenipotentiaries were on their road from Vienna to treat of a definitive peace, they obtained a suspension of arms, which secured the French army the possession of the countries it already occupied, and others also which it did not yet occupy, but which were necessary for its line. The Austrian generals could scarcely comprehend why the French general, in his fine situation, granted an armistice. They accounted for it solely by the inaction of the French armies on the Rhine. Napoleon, however, keenly felt the force of circumstances. He lamented in his heart that a defective combination or a vain jealousy should deprive him of the immense advantages he was on the eve of obtaining. Although he had been indifferent to the glory of entering Rome, he had conceived a passionate desire to enter Vienna, and nothing but the declaration of the Directory could at this time have prevented him. The 9th, the preliminaries were signed at Leoben. In order to sign them, the parties met at a little country house which was neutralized for the purpose. The secretaries first drew up the process verbal of the neutralization, and the respective plenipotentiaries afterwards prepared the other to sign. The Austrian commissioners had introduced in the beginning of the treaty that the emperor recognized the French Republic. Strike that out, said Napoleon. The existence of the Republic is as visible as the sun. Such an article would only become the blind. We are our own masters. We will establish what government we please without the interference of any person whosoever. At Loben, the French headquarters were at the bishop's house. It was Passion Week. All the ceremonies of that week and Easter were performed with the greatest solemnity in the midst of the French army. This army, accustomed to respect the worship and faith of the countries it inhabited, acted on this occasion just as the Austrian troops would have done, which gave the highest satisfaction to the people and clergy. The preliminaries had been signed at Loben on the 18th, and on the 20th the French general received new dispatches from the Directory announcing that the armies of the Rhine were in motion, that they were about to pass the Rhine and would soon be in the heart of Germany. In fact, a few days afterwards, intelligence arrived that the army of the Sambre and Meuse, under the command of Hoche, had passed the Rhine on the 19th, the eve of the very day in which the preliminaries of Loben were signed. But 40 days after the opening of the campaign in Italy, Adjutant General Tissot, who was bearer of the preliminaries to Paris, met our troops engaged with those of the enemy. It is difficult to explain the cause of this sudden change in the system of the government. If Napoleon had heard of the new intentions of the Directory on the 17th instead of the 20th, it is certain that the preliminaries would not have been signed, or that much better conditions would have been exacted. Those, however, which were obtained far exceeded the hopes of the Directory, which in its instructions to the French general had authorized him to conclude peace whenever the constitutional frontiers of the Republic should be acknowledged. It is true that in giving these instructions, the Directory was far from foreseeing the success of influence which the army would acquire, and therefore could not know what it would be in a situation to demand. 10. Amongst the different causes to which the strange conduct of the Directory on this occasion was ascribed, it was thought that there were many persons in France who regarded the great fame of Napoleon with some jealousy. His bold and decided manner in proceeding armed them with respect to his ulterior objects, with his ambition, which might possibly be kept in view, the proclamation by which he had protected the exiled priests in Italy, and which had gained him many partisans in France, his respectful style towards the Pope, his refusal to destroy the Holy See, his delicacy towards the King of Sardinia, and the aristocracies of Genoa and Venice. All these circumstances had made deep impressions, and were often commented upon with very malignant intentions. When the victory of the Tagliamento and the successes which followed, the passage of the Noric Alps and the invasion of Germany by this unknown road were known, the joy of the Republic at the deep humiliation of our implacable enemy was much diminished in the eyes of some persons by the fear of seeing Napoleon gain increased glory by a triumphal entry into Vienna, and then unite all the forces of the Republic under his sole command. Who said they could save public liberty from the influence of such glory and so extraordinary character? The armies of Germany were defeated last year, and this year all their successes will be owing to Napoleon, who will alone have turned all Germany and arrived at Vienna a fortnight or 3 weeks before them. Besides these armies, sharing already in the glory of the army of Italy by means of the 2 divisions which have been sent, will also partake of its enthusiasm for the young hero. He will master them all. Many reasons, therefore, induced them to wish Napoleon to be prevented from entering Vienna. And not only that, the 3 armies should remain separated, but that a sort of jealousy should be kept up amongst them. It appeared that these ideas had at first influenced the decision of the Directory in some degree, but as soon as the news of the brilliant success of the army of Italy and its entrance into Germany had reached the armies of the Rhine by means of the public papers and the accounts of the enemy, they themselves became indignant at their inactivity and loudly asked whether the army of Italy was to do everything. This impulse was strengthened by the feelings of a great number of families whose children were in the army of Italy, and the opinion of the generality of citizens actuated by pure and noble sentiments, who were totally unable to account for the inaction of the other armies. The sensation was so violent that it became necessary to let these armies of the Rhine and the Sambre and Meuse pass the river and march into Germany. The command of the army of the Sambre and Meuse was taken from Bernonville, an inefficient man, whose without civil or military talents, and bestowed on Oche, a young general of the greatest merit, his ardent patriotism, excessive activity, and inordinate ambition, with his constant endeavors to conciliate his officers and create a great number of partisans, induced a hope that when placed at the head of the most numerous army and seconded by all the influence of the government, he would easily become a rival worthy of sharing the esteem of the soldiers and citizens, and thus become a security to the Republic, notwithstanding the unbounded friendship, esteem, and attachment, little short of enthusiasm, which Oche had constantly evinced towards Napoleon on all occasions. These reflections were openly made in the assemblies of Paris, and could not fail to reach Napoleon, who, on the summit of greatness and glory, found himself surrounded by precipices. War could henceforth only increase the perils of his situation by adding to his glory. He therefore immediately resolved to seek a new species of reputation in peace, calculated to endear him to the whole people and create a new career for him. It was this alone which could now rescue the Republic from this disastrous situation into which it was actually falling, from the bad direction of public spirit in the interior.